New allegations of sexual misconduct tonight against high-profile figures. The Washington Post is reporting that 8 women are accusing veteran journalist Charlie Rose, who works for PBS, CBS, and Bloomberg. The women tell of lewd phone calls, displays of nudity, and groping aimed at employees and interns from the late 1990s to 2011. And late this evening, CBS said that it is suspending Rose, and PBS said that it would halt distribution of The Charlie Rose Show. Joining us now is a contributing writer for The Washington Post who helped to break this story, Erin Carmone. Erin, thank you for joining us. So what are these women alleging?
Judy, the 8 women that we spoke to describe a range of behaviors that have a lot in common. In many cases, these behaviors began with a hand on their leg, perhaps their mid-thigh, and in some of those cases, it escalated to walking around naked during the course of their employment at his apartment, from which he often worked. One woman describes lewd phone calls in which Mr. Rose, she said, would describe his sexual fantasies about her, ask her intimate details about her private life. In the case of 2 of these women, they describe forced sexual contact from Mr. Rose, touching their private areas. One of the women told us that she wept throughout the encounter, which occurred during the time that she was interviewing for a job on The Charlie Rose Show.
And how did you go about, as we said, the story says this took place over a period of years. How did you go about confirming any of these allegations?
Judy, I first became aware of this story in 2010 when I was a reporter at the website Jezebel, and I attempted to report on them, but unfortunately I hit walls. I was not able to confirm the story. People were not ready to talk, frankly. It occurred to me now in the last few weeks, because of the amazing reporting that's been done on sexual misconduct and abuse, that perhaps the women who were worried about retaliation, who were afraid of Mr. Rose's power in the industry, of his wealthy friends, of his, famous sit-down interviews with world leaders, that perhaps they were ready to talk. And so Amy Britton, a reporter in the investigative unit at the Washington Post, and I started contacting the women that I had heard allegations about, as well as people who worked on the show. And honestly, we have a lot more reporting that we'd like to do on this story. But at this point, we could say that there are 8 women who have alleged what could constitute sexual harassment or assault.
And 3 of them on the record, is that right?
Correct.
They've given their names.
3 of these women gave their names at enormous personal sacrifice. So I want to thank them for their courage, because certainly even in this moment of cultural change, it is not easy to put your name on something this intimate. And they described it as, one of them described it as one of the most degrading experiences of her life.
What is Charlie Rose himself saying?
Charlie Rose issued a statement this afternoon, which he provided, excuse me, to the Washington Post. He says that he does not confirm all of the statements made by the women. He does mention that he believes that there were, quote, shared feelings, or he believed at the time that there were shared feelings in these instances, which certainly disputes what these women have told us. And he says that we're in a new cultural moment.
Erin Carmone, again, saying there's more reporting being done on this story with the Washington Post. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
Also today, a second woman accused U.S. Senator Al Franken of sexual misconduct. Lindsay Menn says that the Minnesota Democrat grabbed her bottom during a picture pose in 2010. By then, Franken was serving in the Senate. Meanwhile, one of the women accusing Alabama's Republican Senate candidate, Roy Moore, Lee Korfman, went on NBC's Today Show to describe what happened when she was 14.
He removed my clothing. He left the room and came back in wearing his white underwear. And he touched me over my clothing, what was left of it. And he tried to get me to touch him.
Korfman said that she was paid no money for speaking out publicly. For his part, President Trump has criticized Senator Franken, but said nothing about Roy Moore. And the New York Times suspended White House reporter Glenn Thrush today over allegations that he has made unwanted advances towards several women. The Nebraska Public Service Commission gave the green light today for construction of the Keystone XL oil pipeline across the state. That was the last major regulatory hurdle for the long-delayed project. But the regulators approved an alternate route, and opponents, including environmental groups and American Indians, say that that could open new legal issues. The true cost of the opioid drug epidemic may be far more than anyone thought. The White House today put the cost at $504 billion in 2015. That is more than 6 times greater than any previous estimate. The report cites overdose deaths and law enforcement costs. In Zimbabwe, the military announced President Robert Mugabe is working toward what it calls a definitive solution for the country. But the ruling party says it is starting proceedings to impeach Mugabe, ending his 37-year rule. John Ray of Independent Television News is in Zimbabwe. He reports from the capital city, Harare.
As their president plays for time, so his people's patience nears breaking point. This is Generation Mugabe, students who've known only one man's rule their entire lives.
Whether he wants to or not, it's time up for Robert Gabriel Mugabe, and it's time for us, the younger generation, to take over.
Harare is full of opponents plotting feverishly to force him from power. Zimbabwe's war veterans set him a noon deadline that came and went.
So we want to make sure that he lives now. We want to see his back now. Mugabe, your rule is over. The emperor has no clothes.
Late last night, Africa's oldest leader confounded the hopes of his country and the generals who have him under house arrest by refusing to resign.
However, we cannot be guided by bitterness or vengefulness.
So tomorrow, the drama shifts to Parliament and a plan to impeach him, hatched today by his former comrades in ZANU-PF.
You want him gone?
Of course.
Is President Mugabe fit to be the president of Zimbabwe?
No. That's the reason why we've gathered the members of parliament of our party to appreciate the seriousness of the matter.
The very people who helped him rule now accuse him of ruining the country's economy, though not the tyranny of which many would say they too were a part.
These people are giving up their president, but they're not giving up power. With or without Mugabe, ZANU-PF plan to stay in charge.
This past week, Zimbabwe has felt transformed, but power has not yet been transferred.
That report from John Ray of Independent Television News. The Supreme Court of Kenya today upheld President Uhuru Kenyatta's disputed re-election. The decision touched off violent protests, leaving at least 2 people dead. The opposition had boycotted last month's election and charged that it was rigged. The court ordered that vote after it nullified the original election in August over irregularities. The U.S. is putting North Korea back on a list of state sponsors of terror. It was removed from the list under President George W. Bush in hopes of ending the North's nuclear program. President Trump announced the new policy today during a cabinet meeting. He says it is part of his maximum pressure campaign.
Should have happened a long time ago, should have happened years ago. In addition to threatening the world by nuclear devastation, North Korea has repeatedly supported acts of international terrorism, including assassinations on foreign soil.
North Korea already faces a number of sanctions, but the president says this new designation allows additional penalties. Argentina's Navy says it is now analyzing sounds that could have come from a missing submarine. It disappeared last Wednesday after reporting an electrical malfunction more than 270 miles out in the South Atlantic. 44 crew members were on board. An international rescue effort is now underway, including ships and aircraft. Their work has been hampered by 20-foot waves and strong winds. Charles Manson, who masterminded gruesome murders in Los Angeles nearly half a century ago, died Sunday night. He drove his followers to butcher 7 people with knives over 2 nights in 1969, among them the pregnant actress Sharon Tate. The crimes horrified the nation. Manson was ultimately captured and convicted. He spent the rest of his